Ew. What up, y'all? I'm gonna move this out of my way, and we're gonna get started. So how you guys doing? Good? Woo! Happy May the 4th. May the 4th be with you, if you haven't heard that today. For me, it is with me, sir. Indeed, it is with me. So, my name is Dan, in case none of you guys here don't know me, and I'm an intern here at 621. If you're here for the very first time, we are super glad that you are here, and it is a very awesome night for you to be here because we are starting the very last series that we're doing of the whole school year, which is just crazy to me, right? Crazy. But we've had a really awesome year. God has done some really amazing things here, and I am super excited that we're ending for this particular series because what we're going to be talking about over the next 4 weeks is such an important topic. So with that said, the name of the series is called Gravity. Now, if you think of what gravity is, it is the thing that pulls objects of mass to the earth, okay? So the planets are in orbit because of gravity. Every physical object is affected by gravity and has mass, okay? That's why no one in this room is floating around right now. If I were to walk up the stage and then walk off it, which I'm not going to do because gravity exists, and I were to fall face first, it would hurt because gravity would say, hey, dude, you got to fall. Gravity can be really painful when you're on the wrong side of it. And the thing with gravity is it's a scientific law, so you can't argue with gravity and say that doesn't exist or that doesn't apply to me. It applies to you. It applies to every human that exists. And if you act like it doesn't apply to you, or if you are just even on the wrong side of gravity, it can be really painful, just like the people in this video experience.
Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening, but they fought with expert timing. There were funky Chinamen from funky Chinatown. They were chopping them up, they were chopping them down. It's an ancient Chinese art, and everybody knew their part. From a fainting to a slip, and a kicking from the hip. Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were fast as lightning. In fact, it was a little bit frightening. Yeah, but they fought with expert timing. There was Funky Billy Chin and Little Sammy Chung. He said, here comes the big boss. Let's get it on. We took a bow and made a stand. Started swaying with the hand. A sudden motion made me skip. Now we're into a brand new trip. Everybody was kung fu fighting. Those kids were
All right. Oh my gosh, good stuff. My favorite's the Asian guy. What are you thinking, bro? You're gonna catch a pole? It's just so great. It's just so great. So yeah, it can be really painful to be on the wrong end of gravity. Clearly, I'm sure all of you guys have a story like that where you probably fell off a building, maybe. I don't know, but so here's what the series Gravity is about. So gravity is a scientific law that was created by God, okay? You can't refute it. It's something that exists and that affects people. Scientific laws govern life and give us boundaries, okay? But in the same way that there are scientific laws in the world that exist, there's what we'll call laws of life that exist, that are kind of like the scientific laws. They were created by God. They govern life as well, and they give us boundaries. And you can choose to ignore them, and being on the wrong end of them sucks, but regardless, if you're a human being, it's going to affect you, and whether that's in a positive way or a negative way is up to you. And here's the thing, with scientific laws and with laws of life, God didn't make these to hurt us or to keep us from experiencing something fun. He actually created them for the opposite effect. He created them so that we can experience life and experience it to the full. So, for each time we meet in the next 4 weeks, we're going to look at a different law of life that was created by God, how that law affects us, and how we can live so we end up on the right side of that law. And here's what's important about this series, all right? Listen up. And here's some extra incentive for you to listen in the next 4 weeks and get as much out of this as you can. If you can get even just a small fraction of the things that we are going to be talking about in the next 4 weeks, and then you apply that to your life, you are going to save yourself from some of the biggest regret you can potentially experience in life. If you can get just a small portion of anything that we're talking about today, and then the 3 weeks after that, you will save yourself from so much unnecessary pain, hardship, and destruction in your life. And the point of this series is we're trying to help you experience life the way that God designed it to be lived in. And if you can just get a small portion of wisdom out of this and apply it to your life, you'll save yourself from so much. I'd encourage you even to ask your small group leaders about this. So the reason why I serve, or one of the big reasons, and I'm sure the big reason why one of your small group leaders are serving, is because we get this. We get that it sucks to be on the opposite side of the laws of life that God created. And our goal in being here is to try to help you and to keep you from experiencing that same regret, but to experience life the way that God created it to be lived in. And especially for this one tonight. This one tonight is so important. The law we're looking at tonight is called the law of magnets. We're going to look at specifically what the law of magnets means in just a minute, but first I'm going to share a story with you. All right, story time. So a while back, there was a psychologist by the name of Winthrop Kellogg. It's a pretty cool name, Winthrop, right? He did an experiment a while back, and he wanted to find out the answer to this question in the experiment. He wanted to know if an animal would act more like a human being if it were raised by humans and it was literally treated as a human being, which is kind of weird, but he did it. So here's what he did. He got a 7-month-old chimpanzee named Gua, brought it into his house to live with him, his wife, and his 10-month-old son. Imagine walking downstairs to the breakfast table, and you turn the corner, and then there's just a monkey, like, right in your high chair, and you're just like, Mom? So, yeah, a monkey was living with them. They literally treated this monkey like a human being. They treated it the same way they treated their son. They disciplined it the same. They talked to it the same, and they interacted with it the same. So Gua and Donald basically became like brother and sister, and they did everything together. They played together. They ate together. Anything you can think of and anything you can imagine. But to see if this experiment was working, what Winthrop would do is he would test Gua and Donald in a bunch of different areas to see if Gua was acting more like a chimpanzee or if she was acting more like a human being. But there was something that happened along the way that Winthrop did not expect to happen that ended the experiment. What happened was, the experiment ended because the Kellogg's noticed that their son Donald started acting too much like the monkey who was living in their house. And they became extremely worried about their son's own development. And since here's a specific example. What Gua would do, since she's a monkey and can't talk, when she wanted to communicate that she wanted food, she would bark. Ruff! And you know Gua is hungry. So Donald, since he spent so much time with Gua and picked up on the fact that Gua didn't talk, he wouldn't talk either. And when he wanted to let his parents know that he wanted food, guess what he would do? He started barking. And when his parents heard this, they got really freaked out, and so they just thought, okay, our son's been hanging around with a monkey too much. We should maybe get him to hang out with some people of his own species and stuff. So they got rid of the monkey, and they tried to get Donald plugged in to kids his own age. Now, here's why I share that story with you, other than the fact that monkeys are awesome, obviously. This story clearly illustrates what the law of magnets is. And here's what the law of magnets is. The law of magnets says that we become like the people we hang out with, or we become like our friends. So think about this. The law of magnets also says that the friends that we have in our lives hold a magnetic pull over us. And meaning that what that means is like in the same way that a piece of metal is drawn to a magnet, we are drawn to our friends because we want to hang out with our friends. We want to spend time with our friends. And when we're around our friends, according to the law of magnets, we start acting like them and we start becoming like them. And if you really, really think about this, I'm sure you could see how this is true in your life. If you think about the friends you have right now, maybe someone you went in middle school, high school, at a sport or whatever, the people that you spend time with, and you think about how you've changed or you've started acting differently since you started hanging out with them, you could probably see how this is true in your life because it's the law of life that God created, whether that changes in a positive way or it's in a negative way, just like how Donald, when he was around Gwa, became more and more like her. And since the law of magnets is a law of life, it applies to everyone. There's no exception to the rule, even if you act like it doesn't exist or you ignore it. So let me ask you a question. Who are you allowing to influence you in your life? Or better yet, who are you becoming like? Is that a person that you want to become like? And I said earlier that the series is super important, and here's why. Because if you show me who your friends are and who it is that you're hanging out with, I can show you which direction you're going in life. If you show me who you spend time with, who you would consider to be your friends, I can tell you where you're going to end up in life and where you're going 5 years from now, 10 years from now. It's a law of life that God created. So, what direction are you headed in? And is that a direction that you want to go? The Bible talks so much about this topic. There's so many proverbs and stories that illustrate this principle of the law of magnets. But today, to get a closer look at how this plays out in life, we're going to look at a story that a lot of you may not have heard before. It's from 1 Kings chapter 12, and it'll help us get a better understanding of just how the people that we hang out with influence us and make us become like them. All right, it's up on the screen for you to follow along, but before I read it, I want to say the main character in the story has got a pretty weird name, okay? It's pronounced Rehoboam. Rehoboam. Say that 5 times fast. Rehoboam. That's just a mouthful. I don't feel like saying it every time I say the guy's name, so I'm just going to call him Henry. We're going to call him Henry. I'm sorry if your name's Henry. No offense. Or maybe God's trying to speak to you, Henry. Who knows? But before we actually read the story, let me give you a little bit of background, okay? So the story takes place in ancient Israel, and the king of Israel just died. The king was named Solomon. You may have heard of him. He wrote the book of Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, Song of Solomon. And so he dies, and his son, Henry, takes over as the new king of Israel. So what the people did was they gathered in this one spot to recognize that Henry is the new king. And on day 1 of Henry being king, the people make a request of him. And Henry's decision and reaction to the people and the request of him, we'll be able to see how exactly his friends influenced what he decided to do, okay? So we're picking up the story in verse 4, and the people are talking. They say to Henry, "Your father was a hard master. Lighten the harsh labor demands and heavy taxes that your father imposed on us, then we will be your loyal subjects." And Henry replied, "Give me 3 days to think this over, then come back for my answer." Okay, so the people went away. Henry's not a terrible response. He's the new king, probably a little flustered. Day 1, put right on the spot. I don't know what to do. Give me 3 days to think about it, okay? Not a terrible life decision. So in verse 6, it says this, "Then Henry discussed the matter with the older men who had counseled his father Solomon. 'What is your advice?' he asked. 'How should I answer these people?'" Let me pause right there, okay? So I mentioned before that his father was named Solomon, and the books of the Bible that he wrote. The Bible refers to Solomon as the wisest man who ever lived, with the exception of Jesus, I guess. So he's the wisest man who ever lived. People from all over the world would come just to hear this guy talk. Now, if the wisest man who ever lived had a group of advisors that gave him advice on how to make decisions on how to do things, it's probably a good idea to listen to them. Just saying. So anyway, this is what it says. The older counselors replied, "If you are willing to be a servant to these people today and give them a favorable answer, they will always be your loyal subjects. which sounds like good advice, and it leads to a good outcome if it actually works. But here's how Henry decides to respond to that. But Henry rejected the advice of the older men and instead asked the opinion of the young men who had grown up with him and were now his advisors, or he went to his friends and asked them what he should do. He asked them, what is your advice? How should I answer these people who want me to lighten the burdens imposed by my father? Now, notice that in those verses it says that Henry grew up with these guys. So what probably happened was, since Henry grew up with them when his dad was still alive, he just got them a job, like at the palace. Like, hey, Dad, can you let my friends work at the palace or something? So Henry gets his friends a job at the palace, and now they're working for him as his advisors. I can't actually back that up with factual evidence, but you can picture it happening, okay? So, but he's known these guys for years, probably around your age or maybe even a little younger than that. And these friends tell him this. This is what you should tell those complainers who want a lighter burden, which probably isn't the greatest start, but we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. My little finger is thicker than my father's waist. Yes, my father laid heavy burdens on you, but I'm going to make them even heavier. My father beat you with whips, but I will beat you with scorpions. And Henry hears this, something clicks in his head, and he's like, yes, that's what I'll do. So he does it. Meanwhile, the older guys, advisors, are probably just like shaking their head like, what a moron, what are you doing? And so all the people gather 3 days later, and this is what Henry says, or this is what it says about Henry. Henry spoke harshly to the people, for he rejected the advice of the older counselors and followed the counsel of his younger advisors. And he literally tells the people word for word what his friends told him to say to them. And here's what happened. Here's the end of the story. The people, when they heard this, got so mad at Henry that they were like, we're starting our own country. Forget this guy. You're not our king. We're going to go out on our own. And so the way that Israel was set up during this time was there was 12 tribes. There were, and the 10 tribes in the north were the ones that are like, forget this guy, we're starting our own country. And so they literally did. They broke away from the nation of Israel, made their own, but they still called themselves Israel. I don't know how they worked that out. But the two tribes in the south, which was named Judah and Benjamin, merged together, and they just decided to call themselves Judah. So Henry ruled over the nation of Judah, and Israel, with their 10 tribes, just got a whole new king and did their own new thing. There's a picture, I think, up there, illustrating how this all looked in the aftermath. Judah down there and Israel down there. Israel was really the winner. Look how much land they got. But anyway, so great story, Dan. What does this have to do with me and my friends or the people I hang out with? Because if you look at Henry's friends in the story, you can see how big of a role they played in this. And yes, obviously, they first gave him the not-so-great advice to say, my finger's thicker than my father's. I don't even know what that means. I don't know if his dad was fat or skinny. I don't know. And then they made their whole new country. They obviously did that, but their level of influence on Henry's life goes way deeper than just that scene in the story. These are the guys that Henry grew up with. These are the guys that he hung out with. These are the guys that were his friends ever since he was a youth. And according to the law of magnets, Henry's been becoming like these guys for years and years because he's been spending so much time with them. So what are his friends exactly like? The story doesn't actually give like a list of character traits. So the friends said to do this. By the way, they were also this, and this. But just from that scene in the story, we can get an image of what his friends are actually like. So for starters, if we were to describe Henry's friends and what they were like, we'd probably say that they're a little arrogant, okay? They think they know everything, and they think they have all the answers to everything, even though they just upgraded from working the palace drive-thru to now being Henry's advisors since he's the king, because they have so much experience leading people as king, whatever. So they're probably a little bit arrogant if they give him advice like that. Also, they're probably a little prideful. They seem to be more than just a little bit full of themselves. And if you have a high amount of pride and you also think you know everything, that's not a great combination because, number one, you'll hate being told what to do, especially if it's the opposite of what you want to do. And lastly, you'd probably say that they're a little bit self-centered. They don't really seem like the people that I'd want to call if I ever got in a car accident or if I fell off the stage and gravity took over. They just don't seem like they'd put anyone ahead of themselves right away unless they were going to get something out of it. And so, since Henry's been hanging out with these guys for years, he's been becoming just like that for years. And if he's got a pride issue, thinks he knows everything, and he's a little bit self-centered, do you think the first thing that Henry is going to want to do while he's the king is do something to serve the people? No. Yeah. And remember, he was told to do something contrary to what he actually did. The older advisor said if he would have served these people, they were going to love him. They were going to be loyal to him during his whole reign. But if you've been hanging out with friends like Henry's, that's not what you're going to want to do right away when you're the king. He had an opportunity to do something different than he did, but he didn't. He already had in mind what he was going to do, but his friends just put the words in his mouth to say to the people. So, moral of the story, be careful who you hang out with because you might end up becoming like them. So with that said, I want to address something really quickly that is probably a question in your mind based on that story, and a question that you probably just have. The question is, so in light of this story and the fact that I become like the people that I hang out with, am I not supposed to hang out with people who aren't Christians? Or am I not supposed to spend time with people who aren't Christians or don't call themselves Christians? And I want to clarify that is not what I'm saying. In fact, if you do that and just avoid people who aren't Christians your whole life, you are not going to be able to live out all of God's purposes for your life, because what God does with Christians is he uses them to reach other people who don't know him and who don't have a relationship with him. And last week, if you were here, you probably remember Dan Pratt giving a message on the fact that God wants us to be sharing our faith with other people and other people who don't know him. So that's not what we're saying at all. What we are saying is you are called to love everyone. You are definitely called to love everyone. But if you can get this idea from this message, I can't put into words how important this is. It's such a big deal. We are called to love everyone, just like God says. But not everyone in your life is meant to influence you. We are called, absolutely by God, to love everyone, but not everyone is meant to influence you. Not everyone is meant to play a role in shaping the person that you're becoming. Because let's just be honest. There are some people who are cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, all right? And they have no business playing a part in shaping you into becoming the person that God wants you to be. But at the same time, it's totally possible for you to love someone while at the same time not allowing them to influence you. And you might be thinking, okay, well, if I can do that, what does that specifically look like? How can I share my faith with someone and love on them while at the same time not allowing that person to influence me? And my answer to that question is I can't answer that question directly. There's just way too many factors. It depends on where this person in your life is at and even where you're at spiritually. There's just so many things to consider. And if you're looking for specific advice on a situation, talk to your small group leaders or talk to someone here. But what I can do while I'm up here is I can give you an example from my life. So when I graduated high school, I was not in a good spot. And that summer after I graduated high school, I just spiraled down to a spot that was even darker than the one that I was in. I was, in the party scene, I was pretty depressed, and the people I was hanging out with played a really big part in the fact that was going on in my life. But I had one friend who I graduated high school with. His name's Dylan. Some of you may know him. I think there's actually a picture of us up there. Hammocking, which, by the way, is totally a thing, regardless of what Dan Pratt will tell you. This is one of our hammocking adventures. Dylan's on the bottom, wearing a hat, and I'm up on the top. I look pretty pale there, but anyway. Dylan, after we graduated, made it his mission in life to show me what the love of Jesus looked like. And to this day, I have never seen a better example of what it looks like to love someone who you care about while at the same time protecting yourself so you're not influenced to become like them. Because I wasn't in a good spot. So if Dylan and I are hanging out, I could have very easily influenced him and brought him down with me. But rather, the opposite happened, and Dylan brought me up with him. And here's what Dylan would do to prevent that from happening. If we were hanging out, we hung out at his house. If you know his family, the Rahills, you probably know how much they love Jesus. And every time I was at their house, some of their Jesus-iness would rub off on me. I would catch a breath of it when I would cross the corner. I'd be like, what is happening to me? So we would hang out at his house. Or if we were hanging out with a group of people, we were probably hanging out with Dylan's friends because my friends were in jail. No, I'm just joking. They were doing something that we shouldn't have been doing. And so that's what we were hanging out with. And if we were hanging out one-on-one and we were just talking, what Dylan would do is he would listen. And he would ask me questions to find out what's going on in my life and what's going on in my heart and what I feel about God and what I'm thinking about God. And then, after he listened to me, he would tell me about some of his experiences that he had with God in his life. And he would try to tell me every time we hung out just how awesome Jesus was and having a relationship with him was. And I eventually, over the course of a few months, got to a point where I did want a real relationship with God. Dylan prayed for me all the time, and when we would think back and look on that time of our lives, he would tell us that. And if you were to go back to Daniel when I was 18-ish, and you were to tell me that I would be speaking up on a stage talking to teenagers about picking your friends wisely, I probably would have cussed you out and punched you in the face. I don't know. I would have never seen this coming in my life, the fact that I would be up here right now talking to you. But I am here because Dylan was aware of the law of magnets and chose to influence me while at the same time protecting himself so I don't bring him down to the level that I was at. And I really did experience what God's love meant for the first time through my friendship and relationship with Dylan. And it is possible for you to do that with the people in your life. But again, not all of those people are meant to play a role in influencing you, because if you're not careful, you may end up becoming like someone you do not want to be like. And I wish I had more time to talk about what it actually looks like to have a good, healthy friendship with people and what the Bible has to say about biblical friends, but I just don't. We're just so crunched for time. But what I am going to do, if you are more interested in exploring what that looks like, which I'd encourage you all to do, is give you a few resources, which are up on the screen, and they're going to be on your small group questions, so you can look at those too, okay? The first is a book on the left called The Four Loves, written by C.S. Lewis. One of those loves C.S. Lewis talks about is friendship. And he talks about what good and healthy friendships look like and the benefit of good and healthy friendship the way that God designed it to be. It's the section on friendships, like 30-ish pages. It's not too long. A little bit of a tough read, but totally worth it. That link in the top right corner is a link to a message that I listened to when I was preparing for this. It's by a guy named Tim Keller, and it's about biblical friendship, what that looks like, the qualities and characteristics of good and biblical friendships. And I'm going to be honest, that even convicted me when I was like, oh my gosh, I suck. But it goes really in depth as to what that really looks like. And then at the bottom underneath that are a bunch of different verses that you can look at. Most of them are from Proverbs, a few not from Proverbs, but they talk about what friends that you want to have look like, what friends you don't want to have look like, and the effects of those friends on your life, either in a negative or positive way. And again, if you're furiously writing down, it's going to be up on your small group sheets when you guys are in small group time, all right? But yeah, you can keep writing them down if you want. So with all that said, I want to give you some real practical things that you can actually do when you leave here tonight. Because here's the thing, in case you didn't know this, there's a next step for all of you to take with God. Whether you have a relationship with him or not, there's a next step for you to take. And there's a next step he wants you to take in your relationships with the people in your life. So one of these three things I share with you might be that. So pay attention. The first is this: reevaluate. Reevaluate. And here's what I mean by that. So earlier I said everyone is going some direction in life. Evaluate what direction your friends are going in, or the people that you're hanging out with. What direction are they going in? And here's some questions to get you thinking about what that might be. Is the direction they're headed in a place where you want to be? Is this someone that I want to be like, or is this someone that I want to become? And will this person help me grow closer to God or pull me farther away from God? I know for me, one of the things that finally pushed me over the edge to decide to have a relationship with God was when I reevaluated my friendships. And I looked at each of them and tried to find out where they were going in life. And I came to the conclusion that they were going nowhere in life. And there was nothing that was going to change from where we were at now, a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now. And it was just going to be more pain, more loneliness, and more misery too. So that's when I decided I can't do this anymore. I got to make some changes in my life. So I decided to make some of those changes. And some of you may need to do that. You may need to evaluate on your friendships and may need to do some things that are going to bring some change in your life. And again, if you want specific advice on a specific situation, I can't share that with you because I don't know it, but talk to your small group leaders about it. Talk to me about it afterward. Talk to Dan or Steve or someone here so you can get the clarity that you think you need in this decision in your life. The second thing is this, recommit. I tried really hard to make it a thing, so recommit. But here's what I mean by that. Commit to becoming the kind of friends that you want to have, or commit to trying to be the person that you want to be influenced by and that you want to be around. I'm going to be honest, and this may be a little bit hard for some of you to hear, but the reason why some of us in here don't have the kinds of friends that we want is because we're not the kinds of friends that we want, and we're not making any efforts to become that friend. And I'm not saying that out of judgment. I'm saying that totally out of love and even weakness, because for years, I influenced people and brought them down to levels that they didn't want to be at. And I even today wish I was a better friend than I am. But it's law of life. And it's hard to be that friend. It's hard to be someone who influences someone in a positive way and brings someone in a closer relationship with God. But if you're in here and you want that friend, that may be the key for you to unlock some of the greatest friendships that you can have in your life. And if you're in here and you do have some of those friends and you are trying to be that friend, then I'd say great, awesome, keep trying, because none of us have fully arrived here, and there's areas of improvement for all of us there. The third thing is this, pray. Pray for God to not just bring these kinds of friends into your life, but to make you the kind of friend that you want to be around. And I know that may sound a little cheesy, but prayer is a powerful thing. When I got serious about my relationship with God, that was one of the first things that I prayed for, was for God to bring people in my life who knew Him and loved Him, who would encourage me to grow closer to Him, and who would help me become the kind of person that God created me to be. And over the last few years, it's been so crazy how God has answered that prayer. I have some amazing people in my life who have made impacts that they don't even realize, and they'll never even know, and God's used them in that way. And that's something that God wants to answer for you. So pray that prayer. Pray for God to make you like that and to bring those kinds of friends into your life. So those are 3 things that you can do. And again, check out those resources on your small group questions. But before Dan comes back up on stage and the band comes out, I want to share one last thing with you. Jesus was the ultimate friend. He loved us when we didn't love Him. And He took the punishment that we should have taken on when we betrayed Him and ran away from Him. And your friends, don't miss this, your friends will either push you into God's plan for your life or they'll pull you away from it. Your friends will either help you experience all that God wants you to experience or will lead you to miss out on what that is. And if you haven't heard this ever or in a while and you're just in a rough spot, hear me say this, God loves you, and He is crazy about you, and He has wonderful things for your life, not just a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, but tonight and tomorrow and the next day. But God puts the ball in your court on that. He doesn't force you to make that decision. But if you're here and you want to make any kind of decision, whether that's personally with your friendships or a spiritual decision, don't leave without talking to someone about it. And if you want to experience what the ultimate friend in Jesus can be like, then Dan is going to lead us in a prayer in a minute. And if you want to make any sort of spiritual decision as well, Dan's going to help you do that too. Thanks, guys.